What up, Mike? Toronto. VK on the beat. Check. I'm in Toronto where you wanna get the city love. I'm from Toronto where you wanna get the city love. I'm in Toronto like we wanna get the city love. My city love me back for my city love.
Welcome to episode 1040 of Toronto Mic'd, proudly brought to you by Great Lakes Brewery, a fiercely independent craft brewery who believes in supporting communities, good times, and brewing amazing beer. Order online for free local home delivery in the GTA. StickerU.com. Create custom stickers, labels, tattoos, and decals for your home and your business. Palma Pasta. Enjoy the taste of fresh, homemade Italian pasta and entrees from Palma Pasta in Mississauga and Oakville. Ridley Funeral Home, pillars of the community since 1921. And Canna Cabana, the lowest prices on cannabis, guaranteed. Over 100 stores across the country. Learn more at cannacabana.com. Joining me this week, making his Toronto Mic debut, one of the stars of SCTV, Dave Thomas. Welcome to Toronto Mic, Dave Thomas.
How you doing?
Good. Nice to meet you.
That was my low-key intro.
I was like, where's that energy we had before I press record?
Oh, you'll get it back. Just depends what the questions are.
All good, my friend. Lots of, exciting questions from yours truly, but also a bunch of fans of yours have chimed in with questions, and I think you're going to enjoy this. Dare I say. But the first one is from me, and I've wondered this for as long as I can remember. So let me set it up this way. So you're the Dave Thomas, and soon we'll get to the origin of SCTV and everything, but you're Dave Thomas, and then at some point in the 90s, the guy who founded Wendy's starts doing a bunch of like national ad spots. Like I was watching them here in Toronto. Like, tell me honestly, what was it like when another Dave Thomas shows up and steals your name thunder? I want to know how you felt.
Well, actually, it didn't quite work out that way because there was another Dave Thomas before that Dave Thomas from Channel 7 in Buffalo.
Yes.
And he had a show called Rocket Ship 7. And I used to watch that show when I was a kid.
Right.
And his son, weirdly enough, is David Boreanaz, the star of Bones. And after all these years, I got a job as a writer-producer on Bones for 3 years, and I became friendly with Boreanaz. And I went over to his house, and there was his dad, Dave Thomas.
Okay.
And so Dave Thomas and Dave Thomas got to meet up. Now, there was also a collision with the other Dave Thomas, the Wendy's Dave Thomas.
Yes.
And it happened after he passed away. And I have the website, davethomas.com. So I got a cease and desist letter from their legal people.
What?
Saying, you don't have the right to use this name because we own this name. It's trademarked. It's part of our brand, blah, blah, blah. And I just said to them, okay, here's the thing. Dave Thomas is my birth name.
Right.
I registered this company before you even tried. And I registered that web URL before you even tried. And your guy's name is actually not Dave Thomas. His first name is Richard. It's our Dave Thomas.
Right.
So that's not his real name. So bring it on. I want this legal proceedings to start immediately because I want to tell my lawyer to start countersuing right away.
Did you win this lawsuit?
Oh, they backed down immediately. It was just like, oh, so sorry. We had no idea. Our apologies.
So, Dave, okay, so I tweeted that my first question for you was about the other Dave Thomas, because you know how many jokes I got when I said Dave Thomas was coming on Toronto Mic'd, and so many jokes about Wendy's. I'm like, I don't want to hear it. So I tweeted my first question was going to be how you felt about the other Dave Thomas, and somebody by the handle XP Man wrote me right away and says, this may predate you, and it does by a titch. Before cable TV, many boomers in the 60s grew up most mornings before school with another Dave Thomas on Buffalo TV Channel 7, Rocket Ship 7. And he actually advised me that, and maybe I'll do this in post, but he said, promo the robot and Mr. Beeper.
Yeah. Okay, so here's some other interesting stuff.
Yeah.
That's not his real name. His real name is, I think it's Dave Boreanaz. That's his real name.
Okay.
But he was trying to do local news and weather in the kind of Buffalo area,
right,
Rochester area, things like that. And they wouldn't let him use the name Boreanaz back then. Back then, they were like, hey, that's too weird and ethnic. We don't want any Boreanazes on our network.
Right. You
change your name to, and he goes, what? And they said, to Dave Thomas. So he was forced to change his name. When I joined the Screen Actors Guild of America back in 1978, they told me I had to change my name because there already was another Dave Thomas in Screen Actors Guild. So I just ignored it. I just pretended like I never got that message. They sent me one more message saying, you got to change your name, and I didn't change it. And I never heard from them again. So I kind of put my stake in the ground for Dave Thomas and just kept it there.
Well, you deserve it, buddy. And that David Boreanaz fun fact about this Buffalo Dave Thomas is a mind blow because, of course, David Boreanaz, big deal. And who knew he was the son of another Dave Thomas in Buffalo?
Yeah. Oh. And that he would end up working with me. And that there I would be at a Christmas party at his house, sitting down having a drink with his dad.
See, if I shut it down right now, this would be worthwhile. But now I get to ask the other question I've been asking aloud on this podcast for the last few years, okay? Hopefully you have some insight into this. What happened to the Martin Scorsese documentary, The Reunion, An Afternoon with SCTV? Where is that?
Isn't that one of the great mysteries? The short answer is I don't know. The conjecture is there's all kinds of possibilities. The most likely is that Scorsese is still, I was going to call him Scorianus. Scorsese, the son of David Boreanaz, Scorianus, Scorsese is still editing it, and he takes his time. And that's the official version. And then I heard other versions that I can't really relay because they're rumors and they don't have any evidence. There's no evidence for them, so I can't really back it up. So really it's from Ted Sarandos at Netflix. The official word is that Scorsese is still editing, and that has to be my official comment.
Okay, well, when I stop recording, I want the real deal from you, Dave.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Now, a gentleman, so again, throughout this chat, I'll bring in the questions as they arrive, but somebody by the name of Retro Festive wanted to know what happened with that SCTV reunion, as if I wouldn't ask that. It was top of mind because we ask that question on the show every week. But then he puts in an interesting point. He goes, let's assume, and this is Retro Festive assuming, the SCTV project was scrapped. Maybe some weren't happy with the results. Just a guess. Or maybe Scorsese really hasn't gotten around to editing it yet. But my next question would be, can you try again? Get everybody back together in some way and try again without a bottleneck like that?
I don't know. That was pretty hard to do in the first place.
Right.
I would think it's highly unlikely.
Oh.
You know, not everybody had the same idea of what the reunion should be. you find this with every group, you know. I've watched the Monty Python live with Python instead of Life of Brian, Life of Brian, Life of Python. And you see them all talking, and I got to know a couple of them, and they got the same problems that we do, and that is that the sum total of the SCTV group was the sum total of the individual people that collectively made up that group. Individually, they're all as different as night and day, and you're never going to get them to agree on anything. It was a miracle that we ever got the show made back when we did it. But the reason we did was because we were very young. We were starting out. It was all pretty much everyone's first gig. And it was the only game in town. So it was like, oh, okay, yeah, I guess we'll do this.
Well, let's go back then here. So I was interested to learn that you're sort of like, you were like a Don Draper type guy. I feel like Don Draper would have been like the head writer for Coca-Cola. The Coca-Cola account in Canada anyways. You were an advertising guy.
Yeah.
So
well, here's how that happened.
Yeah.
I was in Godspell. I was working on my master's degree in English Lit. Marty Short and Eugene Levy got in Godspell. And I had done plays with them at McMaster, and we were all buddies. And then there was a change in cast, and Eugene called me and he said, you got to get in here right away in audition, because you'll probably get in. And so I was in Hamilton, and I drove to Toronto in this beat-up Volkswagen that I had in winter, and there was no heater in the car. It was frozen to death by the time I got there, and auditioned for Paul Schaefer, who was the piano, he was the music director, and he played a song. I don't even remember what I sang, but I had to sing a song. And I got in. So now I had to go back and try to finish my master's degree, but starting rehearsals. So I missed a lot of classes for, I don't know, the 3 weeks of rehearsal before we actually put the show up. And because then I was gone all day for rehearsals, and forget it, there's no classes at night. Then once the show started, I would do some of my daytime classes in Chaucer, Shakespeare, and Milton, and then drive to Toronto to do the show at night. And it became really a joke that I was trying to do a master's in English Lit. I was a total fraud. And I remember I had to do an edition of Troilus and Cressida from the original quarto. That was my main thesis work for my master's in English Lit. And so I was making money at Godspell, and so I paid a typist $400 to type the whole thing out without punctuation, because that's part of what we had to do, put punctuation, then footnotes explaining what everything was and what the meanings of different phrases were. And I got to the point, so I said, type the text only on half the page, leave the bottom of the page blank for me to do the footnotes. So then it took me 2 nights to just scribble everything down, and I just basically handed it in, threw it on the prof's desk. And I remember getting a note from Hammond, Dr. Hammond, my professor, and he said, Mr. Thomas, please come and see me. He was an English guy. And so I went in to see him, and he takes my paper and he tosses it across the desk at me, and he says, what am I supposed to make of this? And I said, well, I don't know. What do you want to make of it? And he said, well, this is supposed to be your year's work, and it looks like you might have spent at the absolute most maybe a month on this. This is ridiculous. And I said, well, if you really want to know the truth, I did it in 2 nights. And he looked at me and he said, you're kidding. And I said, no. He said, what? Why are you even here? And I said, well, I'll tell you why I'm here, and it's a bad reason, but it's all I got. My mother said, never be a quitter. I should have quit. But she said, don't be a quitter. So here I am, handing you in a pile of garbage because I'm not a quitter. So if you want to fail me, then I'm not a quitter. I'm a failure. But he said to me, I told him I was in a play in Toronto and I was driving there every night. And he said, look, he says, if I give you a B- on this and you give me your solemn word that you'll never try to go to another university to do a PhD in English literature, do I have your word? And I said, absolutely. So I got a B-.
Wow.
After Godspell,
Yes.
I know I tell the longest answers in the world. I'm sorry.
Oh, I love it. No, be as long as you like.
After Godspell, I couldn't get a job as an actor. And it was like, oh, God, this sucks. And I'd been editor of the student paper when I was in my final fourth year of English Lit at the undergrad level. And so I thought, well, I know how to write, I think. So I'll see if I can get a job in advertising. So I wrote up a bunch of fake ads and I went back to the newspaper at McMaster and printed them up so that they looked like real ads. I got fake photos from magazines, made up my own ads, and then I did some scripts for radio and scripts for TV. And then I went through the yellow pages and started calling ad agencies. And by the time I got to Ames at McCann Erickson, this guy named Harry Yates, who had been at Doyle Dane Bernbach in New York, very famous agency that did the Volkswagen commercials in the 70s, he gave me a job. And so I got put on the Coca-Cola account as a junior writer. And that's basically doing all the shit retail stuff,
Right.
which is just horrible. It's newspaper stuff. And it's basically a bottling war between Pepsi and Coke to change the molds of the glass to make the bottles bigger, taller, so that you look like you're getting more, but it's the same ounces.
Right.
And you have to make a fake copy of more for your money. So that was the kind of writing I was doing. Then they gave me a commercial to do that was nobody else wanted to do it. And it was like basically 28 and a half seconds of legal copy. And I got this idea of making that the bit where a guy's got too much legal information for the contest to do. So he's got these charts that snap up and breakaway pointers and things like that. And I wrote it and I handed it in to the creative director and he read it and he said, we can't send this to Coke. They're never going to get it. You have to go up there and perform that at the head offices in Toronto. And I said, okay. So I went up and performed it and they laughed and thought it was great. And they said, who do you want to do this? And I just grabbed a name out of it. I said, Tim Conway. I'm not kidding you. Within 2 weeks, I was on a plane to LA to shoot this spot with Tim Conway. And then people loved it and it became a hit. And then Coca-Cola said, we want that guy to be the head writer. So they fired the head writer and made me the head writer. I'd only been there for like 2 months. And now I'm the head writer on their biggest account.
But that sounds like it would be lucrative to be the head writer on their biggest account. Like, how do you then end up at SCTV? Like, what happens there?
Well, it didn't end there.
Okay, I'm ready.
Because then I did a couple of spots for them as the head writer because Canada was doing their own TV spots. So I tried to copy the American spots. And you get a book, by the way, for Coca-Cola. It's a blue book. And it basically admits all the stuff. This is basically a brown liquid, carbonated liquid that oxidizes rust off bumpers and has no product benefit whatsoever, no consumer benefit. And so, but they tell you the secret, which is lifestyle advertising. You associate Coca-Cola with good times. You say associate Coca-Cola with Christmas, with Thanksgiving. You put the bottles in the background, don't hard sell. And so I went, oh, okay, I get that. So I wrote a couple of spots in Canada. And then the guy who was the creative director at McCann in New York, Bill Backer, who wrote the Teach the World to Sing spot on the mountaintop and came up with Things Go Better with Coke, and it's the real thing, Coke. He says, I want that kid from Canada to come down here and do some spots with me. So now I'm on a plane to New York. I've been in the agency business for 4 months or something like that, 5 months at this time. And I walk into this office on Lexington Avenue, corner office. There's a grand piano, Persian rugs. It's like another world. And there's this little guy in a gray suit with a kind of a string bow tie. He looks like a young Colonel Sanders with like balding though. And this is Bill Backer. And I sit down and he starts quoting Shakespeare to me. And I thought, what the hell is this? So I had just finished undergrad and graduate work in Shakespeare, and I knew a lot of it, and so I just started quoting it back to him. Well, that was all I needed to do. Suddenly, I became his boy wonder, just because of that.
Right.
Not because I knew how to write any spots or knew anything about advertising. So he said to me, do you know how to write a jingle? Well, you never say no when somebody asks you a question like that. So I said, yeah, I've never written a jingle. So he said, I want you to write a jingle. And he said, we're going to do a spot that just features kids, young kids, about 15 years of age, drinking Coca-Cola in various fun situations. Think of some fun situations and think of a jingle that goes with that. So I did that. And next thing I know, I'm on a plane to England to shoot this spot with young kids. And guess what?
What?
It could have been done in America quite easily. But because they were the richest account and because they had more money than they knew, I'm on a plane to England. Then this spot gets nominated for a Clio and wins.
Wow.
So that's like the Oscars of advertising.
Sure.
But of course, Bill Backer claimed that he wrote it. And I laughed.
What was the jingle?
Thought,
what was the jingle?
Sure. It was something like this. I can't remember all the lyrics, but it is, if someone wrote us, wait a minute.
Sure.
If someone wrote a book that had half the look that you and the taste of Coke do, it ought to sell a million, trillion, zillion, yeah, it ought to sell a million, like they do with Coke. So they brought in Billy Davis from Davis and McCoo or whatever. He's a famous musician, black guy. And I really respected him. And I thought, now I'm working with Billy Davis. So I was adjusting the lyrics to work with him. And then about another 6 months of this, and now I'm making I started out at $8,500 a year. And now I'm making like $75 grand a year, something like that, which back in 1973, that's a lot of money, you know?
Absolutely.
And I get a call from Eugene again. Eugene's been my mentor all the way through this. He says, Dave, they're doing auditions at Second City. Because by this time, Second City had opened a stage company in Toronto. And the first one had closed. And then the second one had opened. Eugene wasn't in the first one, but he was in the second one. And he said, they're doing a cast change. You got to get down here and audition. So I flew into Toronto from New York and I auditioned. Took a week. It was a audition took a week of doing the sets with the cast after they did the main show. And the cast was very intimidating. It was Dan Aykroyd, Gilda Radner, Eugene, Joe Flaherty, Andrea Martin, John Candy. I mean, God, these people would become giants, you know? And then there's me in the set with them. The liar, Dave Thomas, who didn't know how to write a jingle but said he did, and now this liar is pretending that he knows how to improvise. So anyway, I got lucky and I got in. And then the rest is history.
Well, the rest is history. the rest is history, but let's just, linger for a moment. Are you self-aware? I'm always wondering, are you self-aware of what that show meant to so many of us? I know you look around and you say, oh, wow, look, John Candy was a big deal and Catherine O'Hara was a big deal and there's Rick Moranis. But, are you aware that you're a key component, you're a key cog in this wheel of hilarity that still makes people laugh and smile?
Well, I'm aware of that, yeah. I've heard it a few times, that's why I'm aware of it. Right. But does it go to my head, or do I feel like that I'm this legend or anything like that? No. I'm still trying to. I'm writing books. I've been weaving my way through doing different things. I've always been able to make money doing whatever I want to do. And whenever I run out of money, I come up with some crazy idea and sell it. Then I got enough to go on a little while longer. So, and I spend money like a lunatic. So I don't ever have this nest egg that I can fall back on. I got to keep making money. And so, but I never doubted my ability to make money. So I was like, okay, well, all right, that's not a worry. But I probably should have doubted it. But these people that I do consider myself extremely lucky to have met these people who are all kind of gathered together at the same time with a common goal. Everybody wanted to do comedy. Everybody wanted to do a type of comedy that was new and that was different. And, these people became my friends. And Marty and Eugene were my friends before this started, but we all went to Toronto, and Dan Aykroyd and Valerie Bromfield had come in from Ottawa. Gilda Radner had come in from Detroit. Andrea Martin had come in from Maine. Joe Flaherty come in from Pittsburgh, actually from Chicago, Pittsburgh to Chicago, Chicago to Pittsburgh. There's these people that were all kind of gathered in Toronto socializing. And Marty Short says that in his fantasies, he likens it to Paris in the 20s,
right?
Where all the artists were kind of collectively gathering, bouncing off each other. And that's certainly what we were doing. And there was a real fertile playground for comedy at that time.
Dave, would it be okay if I pepper you with some of the questions that came in about SCTV?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So Canada Kev says, did you throw one of those TVs off of 100 Roehampton Boulevard? The pic, I guess he saw a pic and it showed John Candy and Joe. Well, yeah, with John Candy and Joe Flaherty are showing kind of throwing it. But did you throw one of those TVs? I
think so, but I'm not positive. I think everyone did. It was John's idea. Okay. That idea of throwing the TVs out the window was John's idea. And it became an iconic image for SCTV in the early days. Because I remember they played that on The Wide World of Sports on ABC. And this is when we were just a cheesy little syndicated show that nobody was watching. And then all of a sudden we're on The Wide World of Sports because one of John's wacky ideas of throwing TVs out the window kind of made people laugh,
We lost John far too soon. But would you mind sharing just some memories of the late, great John Candy?
Well, there are so many of them. Hold on one sec.
Sure.
I got to get something in. Do you use the video on this, or is it just the audio?
Well, I was going to call a audible on the line of scrimmage. I'm capturing the video in case I one day want to use it. Why, are you thinking of taking off your pants or something?
No, there's a statue that John gave me, but it's
okay. Well, yeah.
Heavy.
Okay.
It's on the other side of the room. Hold on.
Take your time. This is very exciting. While you're doing that, I'll think very briefly.
I can't hear you.
Oh, it's okay. I'm talking to the listenership about Great Lakes Brewery, fresh craft beer, helps sponsoring this show, and Palma Pasta, delicious, authentic Italian food. Go to palmapasta.com and stickeru.com. Go to stickeru.com for your stickers and such.
This is not Dave. Small.
Let's see this thing. Holy. Oh, it looks like it's got some heft to it. Okay.
It does. It's a soapstone carving
Wow.
that John gave me.
Wow.
John and I were good friends, and we used to clown around a lot together. And he was like a big kid, and he was incredibly strong. And I weighed about 30 pounds less back then. But on stage, I could run at John and jump up and tuck myself into a ball, and he'd catch me like a football and barely rock on his heels.
Wow.
So we had a lot of fun physically on stage at Second City. And my brother Ian used to come down and watch the sets. And he said he loved just watching John and I play because we liked to play. And
Right.
we were both like little kids, you know. John had, he called it his room. And it was in the world of mime and improv, you know, this is a bookshelf up here. There's books on it. This is a filing cabinet here. Everything was always in the same place in John's room. So if you've been in a few improvs with John, you know where everything is, and you can get there before he does, and that became part of the fun. And the audience who watched the improv sets, like sometimes a lot of the show audience would leave. We would do what they call the book show, which is improvs that we'd set into sketches, and they would be the same every night. And then after we did 90 minutes of book show, we'd do another hour or so of improv afterwards. And that was always new. But a lot of the audience that came to the improvs were the same people that would come back over and over. So they knew John's room too.
Right.
And they knew where everything was. And John would do a thing that we at Second City called pimping all the time, where John would reach up. I got this book. And he would open it up and he said, I want you to read the first paragraph because that tells you everything you need to know about the murder that happened here tonight. And I took the book from him as a mime book. And then John says, and by the way, it's in Latin. That's pimping. Where you get you can't say no in improv.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? You
Right.
can't. That's the greatest transgression. But you can pimp people too, and then they got to roll with it. And the audience is there. They're enjoying every minute of that because they're part of the fun, you know?
Absolutely.
So that's the kind of thing. When I jumped on the deck of this boat from a dock and broke the fibula, which is the small bone of my ankle. That just cracked it. Couldn't put any weight on it. And I went to Mount Sinai, got a cast put on it. And then I couldn't walk. And so I called John. And I said, John, I'm at the hospital. Oh, God, what did you do? I said, I broke my leg. He said, oh, man. I said, I need somebody to help me get into the house because I can't put any weight on this. In fact, at that time, it was so sore, I couldn't even let the cast hang down. I had to elevate it for a while.
Right.
And John said, oh, I'll be right down. John drove down to Mount Sinai in Toronto on University there in his car. He picked me up and carried me like a toy into my apartment and sent me up in front of the TV with the remote and everything. He said, you good? I said, yeah. He said, how are you going to get to your room? I said, I'll slide on my ass. He said, okay. And he left. But he was, you know what I mean? He was a personal friend and he was a professional friend. And you just don't get that kind of relationship with a guy like that every day.
Here's another question from YYZ Gord. He says, cannot wait for this. I would be interested to know what his favorite sketch from SCTV is that he appeared in.
That I appeared in.
Right.
Because my favorite sketch was one that I didn't appear in.
Okay, well, let's hear that first and then come back to the one that you were in that you liked the best.
My favorite sketch was Yellow Belly, which was a Western parody where John played the biggest carrot in the West.
Right.
And So there's a male chorus, which is typical of the Westerns. That I was really into Westerns back in the late 50s, early 60s. And they would have male choruses, like Maverick, who is a tall, dark stranger there. Maverick is his name. So Rawhide, things like that. And so we had this theme for Yellow Belly. Yellow, yellow belly, who you gonna run from now? So John is the biggest coward in the West, and he's dressed in a Union officer's uniform. He's got a gun in his hand, and he's kind of creeping around the town, hoping nobody can see him. And a woman and her kid walk by, and the kid, as they pass John, the kid says, "Hey, Mom." And he's like 8. He goes, "Hey, Mom, it's Yellow Belly." And John cringes, turns around, and shoots the kid in the back. And the kid falls. And then the woman, played by Catherine O'Hara, comes running up screaming. And she goes, you shot my kid. And John's panicking, and he just shoots her too. And she goes down. And then the theme comes back up. Well, that's my favorite sketch that we did the whole time I was there.
Wow.
The favorite sketch that I was in, I mean, there were a lot of them. I liked the Bob Hope thing that I did of the Desert Classic. I liked, we got into dueling impersonations, Joe and I did, for the man who would be king of the popes. And Joe says, Joe was doing his Peter O'Toole, and I was doing my Richard Harris. And we were trying to blow each other off the screen with English character improvisations, impersonations. And John was Burton, and John couldn't do the English accent at all. And so Joe was tutoring him, and he just said, just do what Burton always does. Whoa, 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 huff and puff, and be. And so John did that. John ended up blowing the two of us out the screen. So that was fun. Man who would be king of the popes. Probably from a writing perspective, the sketches, everyone was in this. We took a turn at SCTV when Joe and I wrote this thing called Fantasy Island. And it was a parody of Fantasy Island, the TV show, Casablanca, the movie, Road to Morocco with me playing Bob Hope and Joe playing Bing Crosby, and Wizard of Oz with Andrea Martin as the Wicked Witch and Catherine O'Hara as Glenda. So it had real turns and real twists that I had never seen in a sketch before, not on Show of Shows, not on Wayne and Schuster, not on any television show. We did this is the first time I ever saw a comedy sketch that took that many turns. Wow. Where it didn't just do a one-on-one parody of one thing. It did a multi-layered parody of many things. And then we started doing that a lot. And so did other people.
You mentioned Bob Hope, so I'm going to skip to a question from Gene Velitis. Gene was on the radio here as Jesse and Gene, one of the 50% of Jesse and Gene, actually, to be specific. But Gene writes in, I saw a photo of Dave Thomas with Bob Hope. Did Bob Hope ever comment on Thomas's excellent portrayal of him?
Yeah, a number of times, because I ended up working with him.
Right.
I ended up doing 3-4 shows with him. And I was at his house. I got invited to his house a couple of times just to hang out. So the first time he ever commented on it was backstage at O'Keefe Center in Toronto, where he was playing. And one of his writers was writing on SCTV, Jeff Barron. And Jeff said, I'll get you in backstage to meet Bob. And I said, oh, great. And I had done Play It Again, Bob, with Rick, the Desert Classic, and also Bob in China with his writers. And so Jeff got us in backstage to meet Bob. And I had arranged for a video tape, a VCR, and a monitor in Bob's dressing room so I could show him the tapes.
Right.
I was not going to let this opportunity pass up.
Right.
And he watched it, and he didn't care for the conceptual stuff at all, like Playing Again, Bob,
Right.
where Woody and Bob doing he just kind of blew past that. But he liked the Bob Hope in China with his writers, because that was actually based on a true story. He had been in China, and it was the stupidest thing I ever saw, where Bob did a monologue in China and had a Chinese interpreter interpreting his monologue for the Chinese audience. But Bob's monologue was all layered with American references that audience
Right.
never would get.
Right.
And so the sketch we wrote was me as Bob and Rick Moranis as Milt Josephson, one of his head writers. He had a few. Backstage with a bunch of Chinese writers trying to come up with topical jokes for his Chinese monologue. He thought that was funny because he said, yeah, we were over there. And we did that, but we couldn't get anything going with the Chinese. So we weren't able to do the kind of jokes, And it was a comment on the fact that what he had done, like even doing a monologue for the Chinese audience with an interpreter, was an incredibly stupid idea. So it was a kind of a shot at that. But it was also, a respectful comment on the fact that at least he was trying, I mean, no entertainer had ever been into China and entertained before, so he was the first.
Dave, I was hoping you would do a little Bob Hope, but I didn't think I could just ask you to do it. Like, I didn't want you to feel like you're some trained seal, like bark like a, So it's like, I'm glad I got some Bob Hope. That's awesome.
Well, I got to the point where I would only do old Bob.
Right.
And he got, as he got older, he got what my kids called the milk voice, where there's kind of a little bubble in his throat there.
Right.
And, but I went to his house one time. I've told this story before, but his publicist, Ward Grant, called me up and said, Bob wants you to come over to the house. And I was shooting Grace Under Fire at CBS Radford, which is just around the corner from his Toluca Lake house. So I drove over. And Bob was 90 now. And he was hard of hearing, but he was still with it, but forgetful. And I got to the house, and Ward met me, and he said, yeah, he's upstairs. He had a little makeup area outside his bedroom. He said, he's upstairs. Go upstairs. He said to go upstairs. So, all right. So I walk upstairs, and Bob's sitting in this chair in front of the makeup mirror. And he turns and sees me. He says, oh, hi, Dave. What are you doing here? And I said, well, Ward said you wanted me to come over. And he goes, oh, yeah? Well, what do you want? So you don't get into it with an old guy like that and just say, no, he said you wanted me to come over, and now you're saying, well, so I just said, I want to see that picture you have of Patton pissing in the Rhine. Because he had a photo that I'd heard about of Patton pissing in the Rhine. And he got very excited when I said that. He said, you want to see it? It's right over here. He said, Patton said he would cut a swath through Hitler's Europe and he would piss in his Rhine. He said, I got a picture of him doing it. And he walks me over and shows me this picture. And sure enough, and then there's all these other pictures of, he said, this is Neil Armstrong. He did my special after he got back from the moon. So who else could say that?
Amazing.
So I thought, I don't know, it was pretty amazing. I have to say that, I was a kid in Dundas watching these guys on TV. And I always wanted to do that. I thought, wouldn't it be great if I could do that? And then there I am in Bob Hope's house, talking to him, and on the Tonight Show as a guest with Johnny Carson, and then later having lunch with Johnny. And being on the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson was like a childhood dream.
Right.
And then it happened. You know, I don't know. I think I'm the luckiest guy in showbiz. I really do.
I got more questions, of course. Jason wants to know. I'll just read it verbatim. Okay. Did he create the styrofoam replicas of the countries for the "What Fits into Mother Russia" SCTV skit? His laugh and it still puts me in stitches. You say no?
No, that was a prop guy. And the bit I wrote, and that was my idea. And it was based on the Cold War countermeasure battle between the Americans and the Russians, where the Russians got into big as best. Americans would introduce a bomber with 4 engines, and Russia would immediately introduce their bomber with 8 engines. So they're always pointing to that Americans would have a missile, Russians would have a bigger missile. So they were into this pissing contest with America. So what fits into Russia, I thought, ideologically nailed that, which is a bit. The character I play in that sketch is Felix Dzerzhinsky, who was the head of the and founder of the KGB. And so I researched all this when I wrote Spies Like Us with Dan Aykroyd.
Right.
And we had to know, you know, when Danny's a real bulldog for research. And when I got to his office and the first day, he showed me this steamer trunk full of books. He said, "David, we got to read every one of these books before we put pen to paper." And I was like, okay. I've just come from doing an MA and I was no stranger to books. So, but there were books on, you know, Soviet mobile missile launchers, Soviet ideology, pamphlets from the U.S. government about nuclear weapons and the damage that they could do, books on Central Asia and the tribal movements and Russia's annexation of much of Central Asia and Eastern Europe when it became the USSR. So I was a real student of that stuff. So the biggest, best concept to me ideologically broke down simply for what fits into Russia in a way that I think nailed them on the ridiculousness of their making things bigger by having a bit that just mocked the size of other continents compared to the vastness of Mother Russia. That struck me as funny.
I got to ask you about Bob and Doug McKenzie. But before I get this, you know, origin story, and then I have other questions. Malfurious has a great question I'd like to know as well. How's Rick Moranis doing? We heard about what, you know, he got sucker punched, a disgraceful act in New York City. But how is Rick doing?
He's doing great. I mean, I talk to him once a week, and you know, we stay in touch, and we're still really good friends. And I mean, he's got a life outside of showbiz,
right,
that he embraced, and I don't think he has any real regrets. I mean, if something made sense to him creatively, he would do it. Or if something made sense to him financially, maybe he would do it. But
he was at that reunion, like so that was kind of the big get, because he hadn't done much, and then he showed up for that.
Yeah, he showed up for my brother's kid had an accident in a snowmobile and became a paraplegic. And I called Rick and said, "I know you don't want to do the McKenzies again, but you know, we're doing a fundraiser." And he said, "I'm there. I'll do it. No worries." So even though he didn't want to do it, he came and did that. So, you know, he has his boundaries, and he doesn't he doesn't want to put on funny hats and funny glasses and do what he did when he was in his 20s, you know, because he's in his 60s now, and he doesn't his mind doesn't work that way anymore, you know. But he's still sharp and he's still funny, and I enjoy talking to him. So
would you mind telling me how Bob and Doug come to be? Because there's a duo that brings smiles to the faces of many a Canadian. Well, this is a well-told story, right? But I will tell you.
So during the third season of SCTV, the half-hour show was run on CBC in Canada and syndicated in the States. And the version in the States had 2 minutes more commercial content. So that meant we needed 2 minutes more programming time for the Canadian version. So the CBC said, can you make that 2 minutes distinctly Canadian? And we were like, what the hell? You know, this is a Canadian show. We're all Canadian. What is your problem? And they're always kind of pushing that kind of stuff, which is not the way to build a cultural identity. But anyway, that story aside, we mockingly said, what do you want us to do? Put up a map of Canada and wear tubes and parkas and drink beer in front of the map? And they said, yeah, that'd be fine. And if you put a Mountie in the scene, that would be even better.
Right. So
in the very early Bob and Doug's, there's a big Mountie mug, you know, a mug in the shape of a Mountie.
Right.
But that was, and they were all improvised because Rick and I, we're really busy with the show, and the volume of work that had to be done was oppressive and daunting. So on usually the end of the shoot week, our producer, Pat Whitley, would come to us and say, okay, you guys up for doing some Bob and Doug's? And we were like, oh, all right. So everyone else would go home, and one cameraman and the floor director and the switcher up in the booth would stay. And Rick and I would get real beers. We asked for a Coleman stove so we could actually fry up real back bacon.
Right.
And we had it treated as a happy hour. And because each piece had to be exactly 2 minutes, we would get a count in from the floor director, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And then the reason why I did that theme, which I can't do anymore, was a stall because we were improvising, and we, at the beginning of these things, very often didn't have what the thing would be.
Wow.
You know, during the count, sometimes Rick would turn to me and go, you got anything? And I would go, nope. And then we would go anyway. And we would do about 10, maybe 15, and maybe 2 would be good. But still, it would take about an hour to do them. To get 4 minutes of airtime out of an hour and a half of shooting was very effective in terms of production costs. And the producers fell in love with Bob and Doug because it was cheap and easy to do. Anyway, we were going to drop them after the third season. But then when NBC picked us up for the 90-minute show, they said, oh, yeah, and by the way, we want those 2 Canadian guys. Everybody seems to love those. So we're going to, okay, here we go again. So, but all those were improvised too.
That answers my next question, which is actually from Sean, who said, we know Bob and Doug are Canadian icons, but do others around the world celebrate them as well?
I don't know about around the world, but certainly in America they do. I gave 2 guys, American writers that ended up becoming showrunners on The Simpsons, Josh Weinstein and Bill Oakley.
Sure.
I gave them their first job. I thought they were good writers when I met them. And we did a thing for ABC together. Anyway, in talking to Bob and Doug with them and their friends, they said, Americans love Bob and Doug because they thought they were charming. They thought they were innocent. They were like 2 Muppets. They were these very, very cagey and self-aware in their own little world, which was this little show that they were doing, how to put a baby mouse in a beer bottle and try to feed it till it grows up and get free beer. But they were fun, and Americans enjoyed them and kind of identified with them as a stereotypical portrait of Canada.
Right.
You know?
Right. Okay, now you mentioned the Simpsons connection there. So I take it that's how you got the Rex Banner role. Which, by the way,
fact,
go ahead.
Josh and Bill were running the show when they asked me to do that episode.
Great it's Homer versus the 18th Amendment, and it's fantastic, and you did a great job. Just lifelong Simpsons fan here, letting you know. thumbs up from me. But I want to ask you real quick about so much to cover here, but I want to talk about your brother. But first, since we're talking about Rick Moranis, did you ever hear Rick Allen on the air at Chum FM and CFTR?
No, I didn't. And I regret that. I would love to have heard Rick Allen. That's his middle name, you know.
Yeah, and
it's Frederick Allen Moranis. That's his full name.
Okay,
so he just went by as Rick Allen.
Well, I have like lots of Toronto radio personalities on the program, so every once in a while I'll have somebody on who will let me know that they, I know Ingrid Schumacher, for example, was helping to train Rick Allen on overnights at Chum FM. So these connections.
Hold on one sec. I'll be right back.
Oh yeah, sure. Dave Thomas will be right back, but that gives me a chance to say thank you to Ridley Funeral Home. Ridley Funeral Home, of course, have been pillars of this community since 1921. Shout out to Ridley Funeral Home. And of course, we have Brad Jones there with his new podcast. And I urge everybody to subscribe to Life's Undertaking. And last but not least, happy 420 last week. I want to give a big shout out to Canna Cabana. Basically, they won't be undersold on cannabis or cannabis accessories. Go to cannacabana.com and become a member of the Cabana Club.
All right. Do you know what this is?
Yes, of course I do. Yes.
Do you have some
Chum
of these?
charts? Yeah, I have a gentleman there named Doug Thompson came over to give me the history of 1050 Chum, and he left me a whole bunch. Absolutely. In fact, real quick, before we digress here, I'm doing a special episode 1050. So your episode 1040, but my episode 1050, I'm going to have a whole bunch of people like Roger Ashby and whole
Bob
bunch
McAdory, Jungle Jane Nelson.
Yeah.
Any of those guys?
Well, they're all late great, right? They all passed away.
I didn't know that.
McAdory's long gone, unfortunately.
Oh, really?
Yeah, unfortunately. But who
you having on?
Well, okay, so I had Mike Cooper over here, and he told me he's done talking about the past, so he just dropped out. But I have Roger Ashby for sure. Jim Van Horn. You got a Jim Van Horn there. The Greaser,
no.
Scott Carpenter. Scott Carpenter is going to be on this show. Do you have any Scott Carpenter?
I think most of mine predate these guys.
Gotcha. But Chum, 1050 Chum is a station. I'm a bit young to appreciate it, but I love the legacy of that top 40 station. Love it. Wolfman Jack was on the air there.
What?
Wolfman Jack would come up and do a show.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and this is all part of growing up in the Toronto area,
Because, you had CKOC, right?
In Hamilton, that's right.
Right. And that's where Ashby got his start,
yes.
Roger Ashby.
Yes, and I remember that. I remember him being on Bob McAdory. Is he still alive?
No, he passed away quite a while ago.
Jesus.
Unfortunately.
I know. I'm doing a Twitter thing almost every week about a friend of mine that dies. I mean, they're all dying now. Latest was Gilbert Godfrey.
Oh,
very sad.
You were great on his show. I heard you on his program. You were fantastic.
Well, he was a lovely guy, and I'm so sad that he passed. But anyway, that's what happens when you get older, folks. Don't do it. That's my advice to all your listeners. Don't get old.
All right. So here is my segue over to the music of your brother, but maybe we talk about the music of Bob and Doug McKenzie. Like, I got a bunch of questions. For example, where do I begin here? One is from me. This is from yours truly here, because I'm kind of like healthily obsessed with Tears Are Not Enough. Okay. We did a 2.5 hour deep dive into it on this program, and I'm interested in who was not there almost as much as I'm interested in who was there. So I would find out, for example, that, Buffy St. Marie wasn't there. She's not there. Where is she? And then I find out from Terry David Mulligan that Buffy bailed. And then you kind of start to, weave the fabric is weaving together to get a story. But why aren't you there? Your brother is there, Ian Thomas, and John Candy's there.
I'm not a singer. I don't know why John went either.
Eugene Levy was there.
I know. But Gene always wanted to sing. He was in a folk singing group. I never wanted to sing. I didn't want to be a singer. And it just seemed like stupid for me to go there. So
were you invited?
Yeah.
Okay.
But I just took a pass, like Buffy St. Marie. Me and Buffy went to Mr. Green Jeans, got a burger.
Buffy bailed. Dave bailed. Okay. Paul wants me to ask you about what's your favorite song by Ian Thomas?
Probably Hold On, which got covered by Santana. And they, in a few places, have actually taken writing credit for it, which is insane because they didn't write it. But yeah, probably that one.
So Brad Fay, who is can be seen here doing Raptors broadcasts and enjoys this show, but enjoys your work as well. He just wants you to know that his three favorite Ian Thomas songs are "Coming Home," "Pilot," and "Painted Ladies." So he likes the hits.
Pilot's a really good song. Painted Ladies was Ian's first, so that was a good song too. And you know, Paul Schaefer at that benefit for my brother's son played the clavinet part of
Painted Ladies.
Painted Ladies, yeah. Sorry, just gonna.
You know, I just saw. So I just watched. Speaking of the late great Gilbert Gottfried, I just watched his funeral, and Paul's there. Yeah,
I know, they were good friends.
So sad. It's so sad because I listened to the man's podcast, and there was never any indication to us listeners and fans of Gilbert's that he was sick at all. So it was so, you know, and the same was true of Bob Saget. There's no, not Bob Saget. Sorry, not Bob Saget. Norm Macdonald is who I meant to say.
Yeah.
No indication.
But Bob did die too.
Yeah, but Bob died. Yes, but he wasn't sick. He just sort of right. But yeah, we are losing a lot of funny people. So I hope you're exercising and eating well.
I am actually. I was in the pool before this. Okay. Did my 40 laps. I loved Norm Macdonald, and I never. And the whole time I was at this business, and we have so many mutual friends, I never met Norm.
Wow,
that is so weird, you know.
And a fellow Canuck.
Yeah.
Wow. Another gentleman we lost very recently is, I think, a couple of days ago, I believe. Guy Lafleur has passed away.
Yeah, I know.
And
Rick and I did a commercial with him.
Well, can I play it? It'll take 30 seconds. Let's hear this.
I'm Doug McKenzie. This is my brother Doug. How's it going, eh? And we're having a Molson with Hall of Famer Guy Lafleur, eh? Yeah, Lafleur, that's like a real hockey name. What's that mean, eh? Like the wolf or the lion, eh?
No, Lafleur means the flower.
Well, like a tough flower, eh? Like a dogwood or a snapdragon, eh? Roses have thorns, eh? They're tough. You're tough.
So that's a visual.
Right.
You have to see the takes after he says it means flower. But, you know, yeah, he was a very, very sweet, gentle, nice man. I liked him.
Gare Joyce, also a sweet man, by the way. He wants me to ask you, can you ask him about the writing on SCTV? I took a class with a guy who won Emmys with SCTV and Larry Sanders, Dick Basucci.
Basucci.
Basucci. My apologies.
UCCI. Yeah.
He says, I'm assuming Thomas and Moranis were writing partners, but what was the writer's room like?
Well, it evolved. As the show got bigger, we added more writers. The core writers for the show in the first season was the cast. And in the second season, Harold Ramis left. Joe and I took over as head writers. And we added Brian Doyle Murray, Bill Murray's brother, as a writer.
Sure.
Then in the third season, Brian couldn't do it. And so we brought in Dick Blasucci and Paul Flaherty, Joe's brother, and they wrote primarily as a team during the whole run of the show. And they were there from the third season right through Network 90. Also, Oh, when we started the Network 90 show, things kind of stalled at first. And Andrew Alexander asked me if I would take the job of head writer. And with the blessing of the cast, of course, because it wasn't like the job of the head writer of a normal show, because, you know, I wasn't deciding what goes in the show.
Right.
I was mostly like a traffic cop, you know, going, okay, we need a 3-minute piece here. We need a 5 here. We need this. We need that. And, hey, did you finish that sketch? You said you would. Come on. Like pestering people and things like that. And so I hired some new people. I brought Marty's brother Mike Short on. I brought in Doug Steckler, John McAndrews, Jeff Barron came in the 3rd season, and then he came back for the 4th season. There were a couple of other guys. Oh, and then we had done a show for CBS, and 2 guys, now I'm blanking on their names. God damn it. Anyway.
It'll come to you.
So, yeah, there were about 4 other writers. There was a guy that became one of Chuck Lorre's big writers, and I'm blanking on his name too. Jesus. So there were about 8 or 10 writers when we were doing the 90-minute show, because you need that many people.
Sure.
Because not every sketch is funny, and you end up, there's a certain amount of waste, you know, in all the writing that's going on. And so you need that volume of stuff that keeps going, you know.
And you, David Flaherty, you mentioned, was part of the writer staff, right?
He only did a couple things.
Okay.
Dave was never really, he went on, he did later stuff, I think, like Maniac Mansion with Eugene.
Okay.
But he wasn't really writing on the show. It was mostly Paul and Joe.
Okay, I only bring him up only because I recently had Jane Eastwood on the program.
Oh, yeah.
So, wanted to shout out David here, but yes.
Well, Jane goes all the way back to Godspell.
Right.
She was in that first cast of Godspell. And then she was also in the first cast of Second City Stage. And, yeah, Jane's an old comedy legend. And she did some of the SCTVs as a guest star.
Well, she did the Going Down the Road satire or parody,
Yeah.
which the only person to be in both, I suppose.
That's right. That's right.
All right, we got to talk Strange Brew here, or people are gonna, kill me. So Kevin in Alberta wants me to ask. He basically says, "Strange Brew is still a favorite of mine. Was there anything left on the cutting room floor that you wish wasn't left there?"
Yeah, probably. It's a long time since I edited that, though.
Yeah.
Rick was already gone during the editing process. He got a job as an actor in a film called Streets of Fire that Joel Silver was producing.
Right.
I had introduced Rick and Joel. I'd written a couple of scripts for Joel, movie scripts. And Pat McMahon and I edited. Pat was the editor, and the 2 of us cut it. Yeah, there was a bunch of stuff, but not any full sequences that I had to cut. They were usually just beats that made it a beat too long that might have been funny, but, I can't really, off the top of my head, come up with any bit that we shot for Strange Brew that wasn't used in some way or other in the final film.
Well, here, this one's easier. Ted wants to know, was there real beer in those bottles on the set of Great White North? That was for, but then he also wants to know, did you get to keep your hockey outfit from Strange Brew?
We got to, but it became something that after a while we didn't want because it was just a storage nightmare, Even the Bob and Doug costumes became storage nightmares. I still have my toque and my earmuffs,
wow.
But that's it. I don't have the Parker anymore because they're easy to get. We can always go, I need a blue Parker. Rick needs a green one. And so, yeah, we didn't keep the hockey outfits.
Joe Louis he says, for Dave Thomas, Strange Brew was a seminal movie of my childhood. I watched it at Yorkdale Mall when it wasn't upscale and had a Dominion grocery store as an anchor tenant. And Max von Sydow scared the shit out of me. So that's a comment. But then I go, is this still Joe? Okay, because there's so much stuff here on Strange Brew, but with a long list of celebrities that have done well in the alcohol business, a Strange Brew seems like a natural venture. Have you and Rick ever been approached? And if not, he's just suggesting that you make a beer with Great Lakes Brewery because they support this fine program you're on right now.
Well, we would have been happy to back in the day, but the breweries in Canada didn't want anything to do with us because of the mouse in the bottle.
Oh, right. Right.
And I had worked as I told you earlier in this, as a writer for Coca-Cola Canada and then Coca-Cola US. And that's a legendary bottling nightmare, is the rodent in the bottle. And they have a euphemism for it in the bottling trade. They call it a passenger. Instead of a rat or a mouse in a bottle, they call it a passenger. It's sort of like the airline industry calling a mid-air collision a conflict.
Oh, yeah, softens the blow. Yeah,
that's something that they do, which is like, excuse me, something where 300 to 500 people are instantly vaporized and don't exist anymore might be a little more significant than a conflict.
Oh, no.
So the passenger was a problem for the bottling people, and when we wanted to shoot in a beer store where there's a scene there, we couldn't get into the beer stores. Labatt's and Molson shut us out. They said, no. They got that mouse in the bottle thing. We didn't want to. So we had to build our own beer store.
Interesting. Rock Golf wants to know, how the heck did you get Max von Sydow to appear in this movie? Because had he even heard of SCTV?
No. We were in Freddie Field's office at MGM. He was the president of the studio. And he said to me, who do you have in mind for the role of Brewmeister Smith? And I said, well, I always wanted Max von Sydow. And he goes, Alice, get me Max on the phone. So Max is in Sweden, and he calls him. And he says, I got these two guys in this movie. It's like two beer drinking brothers. Bob. I can't explain it. Here, hold on. Dave. He hands me the phone. So I had to explain it to Max. And so I explained the whole thing to Max, and I tell him a truncated but probably too long version of the story. And at the end of it, Max says, so it's a comedy then. And I went, yeah, it's a comedy. So the story goes, and he told us this on set, that he called his son, who was living in America, and he said, so I've been offered this role in a movie of Bob and Doug McKenzie. Is this something you think? Have you heard of them? And his son said, oh, God, you got to do that, Dad. He said, everyone's talking about that. That is just the best. He said, I can't believe you got offered that. And so Max took it on the say-so of his son.
Awesome. By the way, you were a lot of that Strange Brews filmed not too far from where I'm sitting right now here in southern Etobicoke, because that now is Humber College, but it was the old psychiatric hospital on the grounds, like bottom of Kipling by the lake, and that's where they filmed. Also, the Great Police Academy was filmed there as well. So lots of good stuff. Okay,
it was a big set and an inexpensive set, which is why we were there. I don't know why Police Academy was there.
Shout out to Steve Gutenberg. Okay. And shout out to Jill, who had a couple of questions that other people took, but he does want you to know that his favorite SCTV anything is you doing Richard Harris on Mel's Rock Pile with the disco dance interludes. It's his favorite bit of all time, and he'd be honored if I mentioned that to you, which I just did for Jill.
Well, tell him that I met Richard Harris at the Toronto Film Festival, and somebody introduced me to him and said, "Oh, Richard, this is Dave Thomas. He did an impersonation of you on SCTV singing MacArthur's Park." And Harris looked at me and goes, I never saw that, but I heard about it. And then he starts pushing me with his hand, like away from him.
Right.
And it was kind of awkward. And he pushed me 3 or 4 times to a point where I backed up about 3 feet from where he was, and he was coming. So it was like, what, am I going to get into a fist fight with Richard Harris, for God's sakes? So it fortunately he stopped and it ended, but he didn't like it. He didn't like the impersonation, and it wasn't real flattering if he was taking himself as seriously as I guess he was,
Well,
so.
Remember many hours ago when we started this conversation, when I mentioned Mad Men and you were like the Don Draper there of the Coke account, of course, Lane on Mad Men, I don't know if you've ever seen Mad Men, but Lane was played by Richard Harris's son, Devin Harris. He's fantastic.
That's right. Yes.
So it's another fun fact. And Rock Golf just wants to know, have you ever been to the Bob and Doug statues in Edmonton?
No. We were supposed to go for the unveiling, but then COVID hit.
Right.
And then, I don't know, a few months went by and they said, we got to do the unveiling without you.
Well, COVID sucks, and that's another reason. Put it on the list of...
Yeah.
And here's a fun fact. You can speak to it or not, but you introduced John Travolta and Kelly Preston when you were directing The Experts.
That's right.
Which is just a fun little Hollywood fact, if you will, here.
I had worked with Kelly on a movie in Toronto called something about the Salem witch trials. I can't remember the title, but it was, but she was just gorgeous, and guys just melted around her. And you know who she was going out? He came to the set. Going out?
Who's the guy who can no longer speak, right? I saw his documentary, and why am I blanking on his name? No.
She was going out with George Clooney at the time.
George Clooney, okay.
That we did the movie, and he came to the set to visit her. So anyway, when I was doing The Experts, they said, we need a really stunning girl for John's girlfriend in this. And I said, I know exactly who we should get. I said, I'll bring her in and she'll have the part right away. She did.
By the way, the guy whose name I couldn't remember there was Val Kilmer, only because I remember in the doc, but maybe they were just friends. Who knows? Or maybe
Val
sure,
Kilmer. But I mean, she went out with a bunch of different handsome guys,
Yeah, a bunch of handsome guys. And by the way, Diamond Dog had a request, and you don't have to honor this, Dave. You've already been amazing. But he says, have him do a Bill Needle rant. So Bill Needle's another character that he fondly recalls.
I'm sorry, they're too long. But
no pressure. No pressure.
But I'll tell him something that maybe he doesn't know.
Okay.
Here's where I got the name Bill Needle. I used to do that character on stage, but his name was Bob Clark. And I thought, that's too flat. That's not a good enough name for TV. And I was flying somewhere, and I'm sitting in the airport, and I hear, Bill Needle, will Bill Needle please report to the desk? It was like an announcement over the PA. And so I just said, that's it. That's a great name, Bill Needle.
I love it. And Kevin, it's funny, your illustrious career, so many spots we could talk about, but he remembers very fondly your Harvey's Angus Burger commercial. And I just thought for fun, if you have another 30 seconds, I would play it.
You know what bugs me? Places that tell me they make the best tasting hamburger. Frankly, I'll make that choice myself. But since we're on the subject, I like Harvey's new special burger, this baby right here. Now, I got the jump on most of you because, well, I'm doing the commercial. So I know Harvey's gives you your choice of toppings, plus 3 new ones, lettuce, mayo, and hot peppers. Okay, am I saying Harvey's special burger's the best tasting hamburger? Well, I can give you my opinion. After all, it's a free country. And in my opinion, Harvey's special burger is big on taste. And until you've tried it, you don't have an opinion. I'm Bill Needle. Good night.
Well, there's a little Bill right there.
That's right. There you go. That's right.
Talking faster than normally he would, but that's because they had a lot of copy to pushing 30 seconds.
Right. A regular on this program is a gentleman named Mark Weisblot. So hello, Mark. And Mark has all his questions are about, and I'll just let you speak to this, but the new show, which was produced by Lorne Michaels, Mark never missed it. It was only a brief run, I guess, back in '84, but he loves the intro. He just would love if you could just speak for a minute on what happened with the new show and why didn't that, work?
Well, the main reason it didn't work was because NBC put it on Friday nights at 10 o'clock.
Right.
So for comedy, that's death. All the young people who might be watching a comedy show are out on Friday nights at 10 o'clock. So that's the worst time slot we could have got. And then the other part of it that was a sad thing was that Lorne Michaels was in transition between SNL 1 and SNL 3 or whatever. And when he came back to SNL, and he wasn't really invested that much in the new show, but it had a great writing cast. It had Buck Henry, Jack Handy, Tom Gamble, Max Pross, George Myers, who was one of the brains behind The Simpsons. Steve Martin did a lot of writing on that show. Al Franken and Tom Davis.
Wow.
It was an amazing writing room.
Wow.
Great minds.
Another funny guy we lost too soon is Bob Einstein. And
yeah.
I was wondering I know you were on Bizarre with John Biner and Super Dave, Bob Einstein.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I knew Bob too, and I knew him socially. And you know whose brother he is?
Of course, Albert Brooks.
Who changed his name for obvious reasons.
Right. And speaking of The Simpsons, one of the great, your role was great, but man, Hank Scorpio? A lot of them. Actually, so many great voiceover appearances on The Simpsons by Albert Brooks, now that I think about it. Lots of great ones. So all comes back to The Simpsons. Okay, so we're cooking with gas here. Dave, you've been incredible. Basement Dweller wants to know, and you mentioned you were with Dan Aykroyd writing Spies Like Us. He wants to know why you didn't get a credit for writing the final script, Spies Like Us.
Oh, I know exactly. Dan and I wrote 3 drafts of that script at Universal. And then it was originally for Dan and John Belushi. And then John died and ruined it for everyone. So the project went into turnaround, and a couple of years went by. And then Danny called me and he said, David, I think I can get this set up at Warner's. But Warner's wants these 2 gag writers to gag it up a bit. And they won't do it unless they get screen credits. These are Gans and Mandel, Lowell Gans and Babaloo Mandel. And he said, so I know if you go to the Writers Guild and arbitrate that they won't get credit. So would you agree not to arbitrate? And I said, yeah, sure. I already got paid a lot of money to write the first 3 drafts. I don't need to get paid again. So he said, well, you'll get story by credit for sure. But, and I said, yeah, I don't care about that at all. Okay. So anyway, now I didn't hear any more about that for a while. And I saw Dan a couple of times socially. We didn't really talk about it. And then about 2 years later, or a year later, after they finished the film, I got a letter from Dan's. I got a letter on legal letterhead. And whenever you get one of those, it's like,
right.
Is this somebody named in a lawsuit or what now? But it's from Dan's lawyers. And they say, Dan Aykroyd has instructed us to tell you that you have been given 1 gross point in the movie Spies Like Us from Dan's share of the proceeds.
Oh.
And I thought, that's really nice.
Yeah.
And then cut to a year later, I get this envelope from Warner Brothers, and it's my first check from Spies Like Us, and it was a dandy. And it was like, well, thanks a lot. Wow. So that's what you get for being a nice guy, Dan's the greatest guy in the world to work with. And for somebody to do that where they weren't asked is just typical of the kind of generosity and good guy that he is, you know?
I love that story. That's amazing.
Yeah.
I was at where was I? In Avenue Road, and I can't remember now. I was at a restaurant. I couldn't afford to be there, but the boss was paying, and Dan Aykroyd held the door open for me. That was my brush with greatness right there.
No.
That happened.
He's a gentleman. I told you.
I know. And he's, of course, on Saturday Night Live, when the Tragically Hip are playing, Dan Aykroyd introduces them. So that was pretty cool, too.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So speaking of Canadianity, Brian writes in, as a kid, I consumed a lot of Canadianity, and I missed a whole lot. I was completely unaware of SCTV until 2000 or so. My first encounter with Dave Thomas was Grace Under Fire. Tell me a little bit about this. A lot of people who are younger than I am know you best from Grace Under Fire. This was a big role for you.
Yeah. Who's the person that's
Brian?
Really?
Yeah, I think he's younger, too young, I think, for SCTV.
Normally the fans of Grace Under Fire were women. And, you know, when I took the kids to Disneyland, I would see some people would come up to me. Hey, if they approached and they were like young kids, young men, like late teens or 20s, I would figure strange brew. And I was usually right.
Right.
If they were a mixed group of younger kids, I would figure rat race. And I was usually right. And if they were like middle-aged, slightly overweight women, I would figure Grace Under Fire. And I was usually right. So I'm surprised Brian liked the show. But thank you, Brian, for being a fan. And
well, he doesn't say he likes it. If I read it, it says my first encounter with Dave Thomas.
So I might have been assuming too much there. And if he didn't like it, then I respect him even more.
Okay, can I pull on that thread just a bit, because there's very public controversies about Brett Butler. I know that some kid left the series because the mom said that Brett Butler flashed her breasts at him when he was 12 years old, and there's a very
it wasn't a flash, but she put the kid's hand inside her blouse. Yeah, so
okay, and
I was there. I saw that.
So you saw that one. Okay,
yeah. It's sad. He's passed away. You know.
Oh, I didn't know that.
John Paul Stoyer.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was surprised and sad to hear that. He was a friend of my son's when I was doing that show, who was about the same age.
But Brett had an addiction to painkillers, if I remember correctly.
Well, maybe she did. Maybe she drank, but she was also kind of nutty. I mean, you don't get to where she was with just painkillers. Trust me, I've worked with a lot of people on painkillers and alcohol and other drugs. It wasn't just
so overall, though, not a positive experience for you.
Nah, not really. I mean, for a number of reasons. One is I never should have done a sitcom because I'm not a sitcom guy. You know, right. I did a lot of things because I was curious.
Right.
I started an animation company because I was curious, and I shouldn't have done that because it was just a mistake. But I stuck with it for
because you're not a quitter.
Yeah, exactly. My biggest flaw. But I stuck with it for 15 years till I finally pulled the plug. But, and I did, while I was doing Grace Under Fire, I thought I was bored. And I was sitting in my dressing room and I was like, oh, God, I wish I'd never done this. So I came up with an idea for a game show because Merv Griffin had made a lot of money on Jeopardy and Wheel of Fortune. I thought, I'll come up with a game show. Maybe I'll make some money. So I came up with an idea for a game show named Family Challenge, and I took it to ABC, and they bought it. They said, yeah, we'll do a pilot. So we shot the pilot, and they liked it, but not enough to order it. So then I had this finished pilot. So I walked it around to a few places, and I sold it to Family Channel. And we produced 144 episodes while I was doing Grace Under Fire. So, and it was kind of a prank game show, family reality type thing. I took this job, which I never should have taken. I was co-exec producer and co-creator of America's Funniest People for ABC.
Okay. Look at you. Okay.
And the reason I did that was because I had an overall deal with ABC, and I was friend with Ted Harbert, who was running it. And he said, I said, I want to do this sketch show. He said, yeah, but first, could you do this for us? We need somebody to go in there and help Vin DeBona with the comedy on this spinoff of America's Funniest Home Videos.
Right.
And I said, oh, I don't know. That's not really my kind of show. And he said, well, we'll pay you this much per week to do it. And I said, well, maybe I could do a few of them. So I did that show. And
that's the Dave Coulier one, right?
Yeah.
Right.
That was the only good thing that came out of that show, was meeting Dave. Because Dave and I became lasting friends. We're still close.
Can you confirm or deny the rumor that he's the subject of Alanis Morissette's
That's
You
Dave.
Ought to Know? That's Dave Coulier. I always heard that rumor, but I didn't know if it was true
It's
or not.
not a rumor. It's a fact.
Well, cut it out, Dave. Wow. That's all I got. Okay, wow. You mentioned Rat Race, so I got to ask Matt Chu's question, which is, hey, Mike, I would love to know from Dave what it was like on the set of Rat Race. It was one of my favorite ensemble cast movies growing up, and I'm always curious what the dynamic of working with so many great names is like. Rowan Atkinson, John Cleese, Whoopi Goldberg, Seth Green, John Lovitz, and Wayne Knight. Woo!
Well, it was pretty crazy because we shot in Alberta, in Calgary. We shot in LA, and we shot in a place called Ely, Nevada. Now, Ely, Nevada is in the northeast corner of Nevada. And in order to get there, we had to take a private jet because there were no airports. There was a runway, but there were no official airports there. And a lot of the cast were, the studio, this is Paramount, the studio likes to get you there in their transportation rather than allowing actors to get there themselves, because if they get there themselves, they might not show. And if they don't show, production stops.
Right.
So in the end, it's cheaper for them to hire a Gulfstream jet, put everybody in it, and fly them in. So that's what they did. Now, there's nowhere to stay there except like a Motel 6 and a travel lodge. So we were all in these cheesy motels. And I had lunch with Rowan Atkinson pretty much every day, and Cleese a lot. Cleese and I became very friendly with Cleese and thought he was a hilarious prank. He played with people, you know. Here's an example of the story. John and I took a car to the airport when we finished in Calgary, and we were then going to LA. I think to go to Ely, but yeah, that was the plan. So we arrived at the Calgary airport in a sedan, a town car, and they had one of those airport concierge people that helps incompetent actors find their airplanes
right.
to greet us. So she made the mistake of saying to John, can I do anything? Can I get you anything? And John looked at her and he said, yes. I'd like to have a proper English breakfast before I fly. And she said, what do you mean by proper? He said, you don't know what a proper English breakfast is? I mean, eggs, bacon, toast, tea, marmalade, a proper English breakfast. And she said, well, I think the only thing open at this kind of day is Jack in the Box. You know, I don't even know if they have any square toast. It's probably just round buns, you know. He says, you mean to tell me in a city of this size, Calgary, Alberta, Canada, 865,000 people, that you can't find me a proper English breakfast? That's just unacceptable. So she runs off to get a proper English breakfast.
Right.
And I said, John, what the fuck did you do that for? That's so mean. And he said, I don't know. She looked like she wanted to have something to do. So that was John.
I'm sorry. I was at Massey Hall to see Bruce Colburn 2 nights ago. So I'm going to line it up to get my overpriced beer. And there's John Cleese's face. So I can tell people he's coming to Massey Hall at some point this summer. But sorry for interrupting you. Your story's probably better than mine.
No, I've never seen his shows. Like, I wish I'd seen that Python live thing,
right?
And I know Eric Idle. I've never met Palin, and I never met Terry Jones or what's the other guy? The guy who died. I didn't meet him either. So Gilliam I knew quite well because we were on the same circuit when I first came to LA, meeting the same people, and became friendly. We were at the same restaurants, we were at the same meetings, we were at the same meeting different people. But it seemed you get on these circuits that your agent send you out on it.
Right.
So I knew Gilliam pretty well. I knew him the best. And then I met Idle a few times because he was friends with Dan Aykroyd. And then I worked with Cleese, but I never met the others. Graham Chapman. That's the one I never met that passed away.
So, Dave, you've been incredible with your time, but there's a woman, I would call her a Dave Thomas super fan. Like, I think she runs the biggest Dave Thomas fan site on the internet.
Yeah, I know who this is.
Okay, Emily Elizabeth is her name.
Yes.
So ever since I announced you were coming on, I've been getting emails and tweets. So at some point I just said, just email me everything and I'll see how it goes. So my personal last question is about Arrested Development, which a show I find it's very funny. I thoroughly enjoy it, and I enjoy your role on it. Maybe quickly, how you got the Arrested Development gig, and then I'll cherry pick a few of these Emily Elizabeth to make her day, but probably make her year.
Well, I was friends with Jimmy Valley, who was co-running it with Mitch, and so they asked me to do a part, and they said, so we're going to run about 5 episodes, maybe 6. And I didn't really know the show that well, which is a terrible thing to say, because I was a fan later when I got into it. This happens a lot, though. When you're working all the time, you don't have a chance to see everything that's out there. Anyway, my agent said, oh, by the way, you're going to be working with Charlize Theron in all the episodes that you do. And I thought, well, how bad could that be? So I went, all right, I'll do it. And, but I needed a hard out, which is almost impossible to get from a studio like Fox,
right?
Because, shows always go over. But it was like 3 days from when my scheduled last day was supposed to be. And I just said, I can't do it if I don't get this hard out. And it was because my wife's brother was getting married in Hawaii, and I had to be there for that.
Right.
Well, Mitch and Jimmy just burned through the time like nobody's business. Then we come to the day before my heart out, and I'm still shooting. And they said, Dave, what can we do? We need you to do this. And I said, I'm so sorry. I got to be in Hawaii. And I got to be there. We're all leaving this weekend. And they said, well, would you come back to shoot this? And I said, that's insane. And they said, well, we'll figure it out where you just come back on Monday. You could fly on Sunday night and get in late and shoot Monday. And I said, well, I got to be back Monday night because the wedding's Tuesday or Wednesday, something like that. And they said, well, all right, well, we'll figure that out. But I said, I need a hard out Monday at probably 3:30 so I can get to the airport for the last flight to Hawaii. So anyway, that's what I did. I ended up coming back and shooting that extra day. And it was basically just one scene with Charlize. And I thought this was insane because normally, on a show like that, if you don't have a scene, if you're a guest star and your scene isn't with one of the principal regulars, they're going to cut it. It's going to be in the editing room floor.
Right.
And so But I was in my trailer and didn't get to it till almost the 11th hour. And I was getting nervous. I'm going, these idiots are going to go over. So I knew my lines. Normally, I don't know my lines that well because, you go to block it and then you have enough time between the blocking and when they light it and they're ready to go back to your trailer and learn your lines. So, but this time I knew them really well. And I went to the rehearsal with Charlize and I just threw it away. I just thought, let's see if she knows her lines. I threw it away and she threw it away. And so I thought, okay, so I guess she doesn't know her lines that well. So when I come back, I'm going to kick her ass, So anyway, I went back to my trailer and then they called me to set. And when we shot the scene, I came at her really hard with like everything I had, fast, lots of energy. And she matched me and topped me at every turn. And then I thought, well, okay, let's try some improvising. And I mind this bit about putting imaginary locks on the door. And she was watching what I was doing. And then she went and unlocked all of them in sequence, exactly the way I'd done it. It was, and then Mitch and Jimmy come running down. They're watching it in the writer's room, and they come running down to the set. And they go, "Oh, this is fantastic! We love this. This is so in the show. We just got a couple little notes. Could you do it again?" So I was really glad that I came back to do that.
She is an Oscar winner, so we have high.
Yeah, no kidding. You know what I said to her when I first met her? What was that movie she did where she played the murderer?
Oh, Monster.
When I was introduced to her, somebody said, "Dave, this is Charlize." And I looked at her and I said, "Oh my God." And she said, "What?" And I said, "I thought you were beautiful in Monster, but this is ridiculous." And she laughed. I won her over.
That's great. By the way, you talked about like you could size up where they know you from by their like demographic or whatever.
Yeah.
My 17-year-old and my 20-year-old, they know you from Arrested Development. This is their go-to Dave Thomas performance. So.
Yeah, my kids were too old for Disneyland by then, so I never picked that up.
Now, Rock Golf, since you just mentioned that you don't see shows, you're busy working, you don't catch them till later. He wants to know if you did see Schitt's Creek.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I wasn't on it. I just saw it
Mm-hmm.
because Eugene did it, and Eugene's son, and Catherine.
Right.
And a lot of other people I know.
But he was just curious if you had seen it since. Okay.
Yeah,
so,
no, it's won more Emmys than any other show in the history of showbiz. So, I mean, come on, the show's a legend. And so and it's made Dan. Well, have you seen Eugene's Super Bowl commercial for Nissan or whatever it is? The car thing?
Yes.
Where he plays an action hero?
See,
he was super cool in that, and he looked great.
Well, good and you're still tight with him, right? Does he get a weekly call like some of your other calls?
For me, I'm not as tight with Gene because Gene is harder to get a hold of.
Gotcha.
He just doesn't return calls ever.
I got to get to Emily Elizabeth, or I'm worried what might happen here. So I'll just I cherry picked because there were so many questions. Thank you, Emily. This is your moment. I think we're making her year here. But what was your favorite sketch you did on the Dave Thomas comedy show? And then in parentheses, Emily writes, which, side note, should really have been given at least 2 seasons. I say aim higher, but go ahead.
Yeah, I wish it had too. But here's the story why it didn't. The pilot aired, and we did these shows shot them out of order.
Right.
But Marty Short and Chevy Chase were my guests on the pilot. And there was a airplane sketch in that called The Frighten Brothers. And these were wigs that I discovered when I was doing the news show that were originally created for Sweeney Todd. And they had like a little strings in them that raised the hair up so that you could look frightened. And originally Sweeney Todd came out and it was controlled by a monofill that ran down your sleeve to your thumb. So if you just straighten your arm, your hair went up. And so the sketch was just that we're the Frightened Brothers and we're flying on a plane and everything frightens us. And so what the hell was the questioning? I forget why I got onto this. Anyway, that was the first sketch. And when the show premiered, Chevy and Marty came over to my house to watch it. And I was living in the Pacific Palisades at the time. And while the show aired, a plane crashed in Long Island.
Oh.
And underneath the Frightened Brothers on the Airplane sketch is a bar listing the casualties. And it was just so horrible and so tasteless and made the comedy that we were doing look like it was evil.
Right.
And Chevy was dying. He was laughing so hard he was on the couch.
Is Chevy a good guy? I've heard conflicting reports on that. Are you a decent guy? He's a good guy?
I always liked him, but he's been an asshole to me. He's been an asshole to everybody at some point. And he can't help himself. But you know what? He's an asshole to everybody. So if you take it personally, that's your problem.
Well, those stories, like the Community stories, like with Dan Harmon, are like stuff of legends you hear about. Like
I don't know. I wasn't there. But, you know, this is a business where, here's my theory about this.
Yeah.
Being funny is not a talent. It's a condition. Most of the people I know who are funny are crazy in some way. And when I would be interviewing writers for writing rooms that I set up, if somebody came in and they were like a handsome looking jock, I thought, profile. This guy's never going to be funny. I can tell already. And I was usually right. But if they were short or weird or dweebs or nerds or fat or, you know, those people invariably would be funny.
And this is why it's so frustrating. Again, our third Mad Men reference of the freaking day here. But it's frustrating when John Hamm is actually very funny, right? That's frustrating. Like, he shouldn't be funny and handsome. Pick one.
Well, he's funny, but he's not Norm Macdonald funny.
No, he's not. You're right.
You know what I mean?
You're right.
So he's funny
enough
as a comedy actor.
Right.
You know, because I think Ryan Reynolds is funny too.
Right. That's true.
But, you know, he's a comedy actor. He's not a sketch player or stand-up, you know.
Okay, so back to Emily here, because she brings up something that I'm dying to hear, but I'm so glad Emily asked this question. Boris and
my favorite sketch. I never answered your question.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. I'm moving on to Boris and Natasha. Yeah, what's the favorite sketch from the Dave Thomas?
Probably Jack Palance. I did Jack Palance because I always thought he was like so grotesque looking that it was funny to me, you know, and scary looking. Sure. And when you meet this big 6 foot guy that can do one-handed push-ups, come on, he's a scary looking guy. And he had this breathy way of talking that was, and for a while he was host of this Believe It or Not. I mean, can you imagine a worse choice for the host of a show like Believe It or Not? And he would go, the tiny deek antelope of Kenya, so small, you can hold it in the palm of your hands. Believe it or not. So this is a guy that I'd heard a story about. And that's why I love doing this sketch, because I did Jack Palance as a star of a sitcom, which I thought would be the worst miscasting you could do. The guy who played the butler in Jekyll and Hyde, which was a TV movie that Jack Palance was in, he was in a show with me, and he told me this story of the first read through with Jack for that. He said that they did the read through, and then they were going to break for lunch, and before they could say anything like, "Where do you want to go for lunch?" Jack jumps up and runs out of the room. And everybody goes, what the hell? Where did he go? Is he coming back? What happened? Did you say something to him? What happened? And at the end of lunch, he runs in, pouring sweat. This is a Toronto summer. And I just wanted to get out and run around for a while. Well, I mean, if that happened to me and I was doing a show with a guy like that, I would go, okay, we're going to wrap. We can't do a show with this guy. He's completely insane. and we're gonna go over. He's gonna not show up some days. It's gonna be a nightmare.
Oh my God.
So
Okay.
doing Jack was my favorite part of the Dave Thomas show.
Okay. Now, Boris and Natasha. Okay. The
Yeah.
movie. So Emily writes, it's one of my favorite lesser known projects of yours. Was the film fun to work on, and any idea why it didn't ultimately receive a theatrical release?
Well, part of the reason was that it was produced by Sally's husband, Jonathan Crane.
Oh, Sally Kellerman.
Jonathan was insane. And he told everybody he had Tourette's, but I think he just wanted to walk around going, oh, fuck shit. I think he just wanted to cuss at everybody. And he made a flat deal with the crew and did everything he could during production to shut it down. And Charlie Martin Smith was the director. And so we ended up only shooting about 3/4 of the movie. So there's big chunks of it that make absolutely no sense, where it goes from this scene to that scene, and there needs to be a connective scene so that that third scene makes sense. But of course, no. Jonathan Crane, we ran out of time because he did such a cheap deal on the financing. And then Sally was an insane diva as well. So she was difficult to work with. And
and wait a minute. One of the things I read is that there's no Rocky and Bullwinkle in this movie.
None.
Well,
I mean, that troubled me too. But here's what happened with me. When I read the script, I was told by Charlie that it was going to be rewritten, and that if I wanted to, I could rewrite some of the stuff myself. I did end up rewriting some of the scenes that I was in, but mostly I didn't get a chance to rewrite. And it's like, if you don't, this is why actors get the reputation for being assholes. Because if you don't act like an asshole to protect yourself, you end up getting sucked into things. And then if you bail, they sue you for bailing. So
right.
There was no way out for me. And I'm sorry, Emily, that you thought that this was an underappreciated film, but I think it was underappreciated for a reason, because it just didn't work.
I think Emily loves anything that you're in, so she's a big fan.
She's very sweet, and unfortunately, maybe loves me too much, and that's
well, you said
something that she needs to see somebody about that, because she needs a boyfriend. God bless her. And I think that to answer your question, though, Emily, that this was a interesting experience, but not one of my favorite shows. I ended up becoming a mean prankster on this show. And here's an example.
Yeah.
I came to the set. Okay. I asked for favored nations, because if you do a show with a woman and you ask for favored nations, they will ask for things, a female star, that you would never even think of. So I asked for what favored nations. And so she gets this double banger, this trailer that's got 2 bedrooms, one at one end, one. Yeah, I don't need 2 bedrooms, but I ended up getting this big double banger trailer just like her. And so it was always a pain in the neck for the transpo guys to find a place to park these damn things. So I got to the set one day, and I usually just drive and park right in front of my trailer. And so I drive up and park in front of my trailer, and the transportation guy comes up. He says, Dave, we got to move your trailer. And I said, okay. And they said, well, we want to move it at a time that's convenient for you. And I said, well, I just got here. I'm going to make up in here. This is probably the perfect time to move it. And I gave him the keys of my car. I said, you move my car at the same time. And he said, no, we want to move it at a time that's convenient for you. If this doesn't work. So I can see now Sally's on the set in her chair getting made up, and she's looking at me, and she can see the transpo guy talking to me. And he said, the transportation guy said, Sally got her knickers in a knot because we mistakenly put her trailer in the number 2 position. and her trailer should be in the number 1 position. And this is all the politics of the call sheet and the bullshit because of that. So I said, well, I don't care when you move it, just move it whenever you like, because I'm going to makeup, and then if I have to walk over there. So anyway, I see her looking at me during all this, and I thought, she's really nervous about this now. She thinks I'm going to carve her a new one. So I walk up to her, and she was in character on and off camera, and that kind of bugged me too, you know. Oh, Boris, please, I'm not trying to be the big star. I just feel that, you know, because I'm an older woman, I want to have my trailer closer to makeup hair. And I said, no, I'm glad they're moving my trailer, Sally, because when I came out of it, there was this like shit smell on the ground that made me sick. And and she looks at me, she goes, oh, great. Now that shit smell will be in front of my trailer. And I said, well, you're the idiot that wants to move your trailer. So, okay, she didn't even connect that I'd pulled up and not even got into my trailer. You know what I mean? This is how out of it she was. So the next day I get to the set and the trailer's hosing down the ground in front of her trailer. And he says, thanks a lot, Dave. We've been hosing the shit smell out of the front of this trailer. I just made that up, you know. Yeah. And I said, well, you're the idiots who put her trailer in the wrong space. Don't blame me, you know. So
I don't know how you top this one. But sorry, was there more? I'm sorry. I thought the story was over there. But should I ask the very final Emily question?
Sure, okay. Go ahead.
You played Scott Aukerman's adoptive father on the Comedy Bang Bang TV series. That every time I watch those episodes, I can't help but feel you were channeling your inner Archie Bunker as that character. Was there any influence there?
Well, it wasn't Archie. It was just me. Like, anytime you get to play an asshole, it's just like a gift. Because that's the easiest thing to play. You know, and so they said to me, we need you to play Scott Aukerman's father, and he's kind of an asshole. And I said, I'm in, because I know that's fun to play, because I'll be getting to, you know, take this sweet guy and basically, you know, carve him a new one every time I come on camera. So it was really fun for that reason and that reason alone. And Emily, thank you for your fan support, and thank you for, you know, all the kind things you've said about me, maybe a little too kind. You know, there are people that don't think I'm anywhere near as good looking as you seem to, including myself, but God bless you. Anyway, thanks.
Phil says, I've gotten the sense from recent interviews that that's you, Dave, consider yourself retired from working in front of the camera. Is there any dream offer that would cause you to reconsider? Somebody you've always wanted to work with but never got the chance, or someone you'd work with again anytime if they ever asked you? Some character or story you consider unfinished business? It's a good way to wrap up here.
The short answer is no. The detailed answer and the true answer is, if I was offered a good part as a judge or a guy in a wheelchair or a guy in a hospital bed, I would take it. I still want to be standing around sets. I'm 72, and it's just like, give me a break, you know? I've done this, been there, done that. I started becoming a jerk on the set years ago when I was running, when it started to become less interesting to me and less fun. And I remember I did a show that I got paid a ton of money for, Beethoven's Fifth. And I did it for money. And I knew the producer. And I said, I'm doing this for money. I said, but I read the script. And this guy does a lot of running around. And I don't want to do that. So I'm not going to do it if I can't get a runner, somebody who will double for me.
Right.
Anytime the guy has to run. And Mike says, yeah, that's not a problem. We'll get a guy who looks exactly like you to do the running. So I was writing a script with a writer friend of mine in my trailer while I was doing that show. That shows you how invested I was in it. And I remember they called me to the set. And every time they knock on the door, Mr. Thomas, we're ready for you. You know what I mean? You don't. This is when you should quit. It's when that knock on the door from the AD makes you want to quit.
Right.
And anyway, I go out there and the director says to me, okay, Dave, we had you run around down the hill here, and now you just need to run into the shot and here's your mark. And I said, I'm not going to do that. He said, what do you mean? I said, I'm in my contract. I said, I will step into the shot. I will lean into the shot, but I'm not running into the shot. And my friend who I was writing the script with was watching all this. And the director says, but Dave, it's only a few feet. I said, I have it in my contract. I will lean in or I will walk in, but I will not run. And he says, okay. So he says, we need an hour here to relight. Okay, everybody. So I went back to my trailer. And as I'm walking back to my trailer, my friend Tim Hedrick says, you know, you should quit. And I said, why? He said, because you're becoming a complete asshole. And I said, you know what? You're right. And that was right about the time that I took the job on Bones as a producer writer and then went to the Blacklist because it was like doing the writing. I still love that. You know what I mean?
Right.
But being on camera just doesn't excite me. There just really isn't a role that I would like to do. And if, as I said, if I get to do it like sitting in a chair, okay, maybe. But
now, what if Rick has an epiphany and he calls you up and says, "Hey, let's do a Bob and Doug thing, like a movie or something"? Would that get you?
I can say yes to that because it's so unlikely that Rick would ever have an epiphany and call me for that I can say sure because it would never happen.
Remember, I'm recording this, Dave. Okay, so so I will be honest, Dave. Sometimes I have these conversations with people I admire and respect, like yourself, and then at the 45-minute mark, I get the impression that they kind of want to move on with their day. And can you wrap it up? I never got that impression today, so I want to say thank you so much for being so decent with your time because I took a good 2 hours from you. And on that note, I got a very interesting specific question from someone named Phil. And I told Phil, I said, Phil, I'm calling an audible in the line of scrimmage. I don't know what mood Dave's going to be in or how it goes. I said, but now I've made a decision to ask it because it's so specific. I feel like we could make Phil's life here. So let me read it. And this might require me emailing you later images so you can look at them, but we'll see. This is Phil. Entirely personal to me. See attached images. I won this in a Toronto Star contest at the height of McKenzie Brothers Mania, 1981, ? I had always thought that given the autographs were of the characters and not of you and Rick, that the Doug autograph looks so odd that you guys didn't sign this. But if it was done by some junior promo lackey at Anthem. But recently, Rob Salem has told me he thought they were legit. And I've seen the Tonight Show appearance with your right wrist in a cast at around the same time. So now I'm thinking you guys signed this for real. Did you? So my question is maybe, did you ever sign in the character of Doug McKenzie?
All the time.
So do you think this was you? You probably signed this then.
Yeah.
If I sent
Can you hold it up or you can't do that?
No, I gotta flip this email. I will flip this email to you because I can't hold it up. But
flip it to me because I will know instantly if it's the one I did when I busted my finger as Walter Cronkite and had my hand in a cast.
Well, here, riveting live recording here. But so you're not in front of a computer right now, right? So I'm gonna flip.
Yeah, I'm in front of a computer.
Okay, so check your email, Dave Thomas. I have these goggles, the delay in case I want to call it back. Okay, so now you should be getting something in the inbox from Toronto Mike. And you're gonna I hope I forwarded it correctly here. You never know what's gonna happen on a Toronto Mike episode here. Oh yeah, it came through. I'm looking at it now.
I don't have it yet.
Okay.
And I'm clicking.
Well, maybe I'll just say
Got it.
Oh, you got it. Okay.
Got
Okay.
it.
Look at that. Look at that. Wow.
All right, let me
It's
see
exciting.
this.
So I'm looking at it too. You're looking at it. Nice thinking, eh? Doug McKenzie. He's been wondering for how many years? When was 1981? That was 41 years ago. He's been wondering if you actually signed this or not.
Yeah. Okay, so first of all, that's Rick's writing for sure.
That's a good sign.
And that's my bad writing with the busted finger.
Wow.
So that is definitely legit. That's a real, that is a real thing. And you can email me this, guys.
Well, you have it there because I forwarded you his email. So his email.
All right. Well, I'm going to get his info. Okay. I'm going to send him a picture.
Wow.
Of without the busted finger signature that's he can add to his collection or whatever.
Dave,
if he's been thinking about it all this time and thinking that he got ripped off,
right,
that troubles me.
Yeah.
And I would like to reward him for being such a fan, and I'll send him a photo with the proper signature on it.
For 41 years, he was waiting for you to come on some local podcast. And you did it, Dave. Dave, where's your Order of Canada?
Hold on. I don't have the... hold on.
And congrats, by the way. I know you can't hear me now because you took off the headset, but congratulations to you. Dave is now looking at, he's got a great bookshelf. I see like a skull, and there's so much activity here. I'm going to get a screen cap so you can see. Is that an Emmy? I guess he's won Emmys and Grammys. Oh my goodness. He's looking here. I'm going to see, what has he won?
Here it is. Okay, so I've got two because I thought I threw one out.
Oh no.
I threw it out.
You can't throw that.
So this is the pen.
Gotcha.
That you put on. I don't have the other part yet because of COVID.
Okay.
That people are using that excuse for everything now. Do you know what I mean?
Well, congratulations, man. They don't just hand those out like candies. That's a big deal.
No, they hand them out like Order of Candidates, but you know.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Congratulations. So, Dave, what are you up to these days?
This is a book I wrote with Max Allan Collins. It's available on Amazon for the shockingly low price of $8.99. And it is a quantum mystery thriller. Now, isn't that a mouthful? And here's the log line of the little book. Well, it's like 350 pages. It's not that little. A small-time thief from South Boston named Jimmy Layton is on the run from a Vietnamese drug lord. He owes him $5,000, and the drug lord's going to kill him if he catches him. So he takes a trip across the river to Cambridge, and he gets a Harvard sweatshirt, tries to blend in with the students, but he's a second-story man. That's his thing. He steals. So he breaks into a house to get some cash because he's got no cash. And he sees the basement is locked. He opens up the basement, he goes downstairs, and he sees all this scientific equipment. Well, what he doesn't know is that there's a quantum experiment going on down in the basement, and he connects this cable from this gizmo to this quantum battery, and the next thing he knows, it becomes a steering wheel in his hands in Chicago, 1,000 miles away, in another version of his life. And we are playing here with what's called the many worlds theory that was proposed by Hugh Everett III in the 50s. And the concept of Hugh Everett's theory behind his theory, which is a little like the Big Bang Theory, which was just a theory till it was proved by the Hubble telescope, or the Tubble telescope, as I call it. And anyway, the basis of his theory is for every binary choice in life, every A-B choice, you can turn left at an intersection or turn right. The realized choice becomes your reality. The unrealized choice, or the road not taken, still exists, according to this guy, that all the choices that you made as a result of that right turn that you didn't make exist in another reality and another universe. And as we move through life, making all these choices, our multiple universes are branching off into other universes. So this is the story about a guy who ends up hopping from one version of his life to another. In one version, he's the small-time thief. That's the baseline version. He then hops to one where he's a slightly richer version of himself in Chicago, in another one where he's a soldier in Afghanistan, in another one where he's a priest, in another one where he's a boxer. They're all choices that he could have made from his baseline reality. In other words, he doesn't get to be the king or president of Argentina. They're all choices that a little orphan from South Boston might have made, but they're different versions of his life. And all the people that he knows are different versions of themselves, playing out different realities. And so there are two cops investigating. When he connects these two things together in the basement of this physics professor in Cambridge, he gets shot in the head simultaneously with that. And he doesn't die. Hi, who's this?
This is my boy Jarvis. Jarvis, say hi to Dave.
Hi.
And hold on, there's one more. I have 4 kids.
Hi.
All right, hold on.
Hi.
Okay, so there.
Hi,
that's
you're
little,
the energetic
that's
one.
little Morgan. Guys, 2 more minutes. I know, but okay. What is it? Quickly. Oh, let me just show my friend Dave here real quick. Jarvis just made that, and he's
that is fantastic.
Dave said it's fantastic.
Alligator in a tree or a crocodile in a tree?
Can I come up and see it in 2 minutes?
I made a scene for
Okay.
Bunny.
I'm gonna come up and see you in 2 minutes. Okay, love you. Give me 2 more minutes. Almost done.
Night, Morgan.
No,
Night,
you can't
Jared.
stay. Honestly, we're literally 2 minutes. My mind's being blown here. 2 minutes. I love you very much. Mwah. Oh, they love me too. Isn't that nice? Okay. Oh. All right.
So anyway,
Sorry, Dave. Yeah, go on.
I think you should keep that.
I
think
will.
that's
Oh, I
fun.
don't edit anything. Don't worry.
These two cops, at the same time that he connects these things, he gets shot in the head. He broke into somebody's house. Somebody shot him. These two cops find this guy. He's not dead. He's in a coma, which is why he's hopping from one version of his life to another and not staying there.
Right.
And these two cops are trying to investigate who shot Jimmy Layton on a parallel story with Jimmy hopping from one version of his life to another.
What's the name of this book again? I know you said
It's
it.
called The Many Lives of Jimmy Layton.
The Many Lives of Jimmy
$8.99 on
Layton.
Amazon.
Well, it's a deal at half the deal at twice the price. I almost said it's a deal at half the price. That's I'm getting loopy here. We're all playing checkers, and you, Dave Thomas, are playing chess. Okay, everyone buy Dave's book. It's mind-bendingly fascinating. Well done.
And review it too, because nobody counts a buy as a buy unless you review it. And I'm ready for the truth. So if you give it a rotten review, I will accept that like a man. If you give it a good review, I'll accept that like a woman, like the lady that I am. I don't know. Whatever. I just didn't plan that sentence out before I started it. Probably should have.
And again, I'm going to say thank you, and then I'm going to wrap up the recording. Then we're going to take a screen capture together. But seriously, from the bottom of my heart, and on behalf of this city of Toronto that misses you, thank you for all this time and for answering all my annoying questions.
Well, it was a pleasure to be on your show. Thank you for having me, and God bless Toronto. I miss it.
And that brings us to the end of our 1040th show. You can follow me on Twitter. I'm at Toronto Mike. Dave is at the Dave Thomas. Our friends at Great Lakes Brewery are at Great Lakes Beer. Palma Pasta is at Palma Pasta. Sticker U is at Sticker U. Ridley Funeral Home are at Ridley FH. And Canna Cabana are at Canna Cabana _. See you all next week.
Well, I wanna take a streetcar downtown. that's true because everything is coming up rosy and green. Yeah, the wind is cold, but the smell of snow warms me today. And your smile is fine, and it's just like mine, and it won't go away. 'Cause everything is rosy and green. Well, I've been told that there's a sucker born every day, but I wonder who. Yeah, I wonder who. Maybe the one who doesn't realize there's 1,000 shades of gray. 'Cause I know that's true, yes I do. I know it's true, yeah. I know it's true. How about you? Oh, they're picking up trash and they're putting down roads. And they're brokering stocks, the class struggle explodes. And I play this guitar just the best that I can. Well, maybe I'm not and maybe I am. Ah, who gives a damn, because everything is coming up rosy and green. Yeah, the wind is cold, but the smell of snow warms me today. And your smile is fine, and it's just like mine.